Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to your event today. I have a presentation to share with you. It takes about 35 minutes to go through. It covers a variety of different areas. When I looked at the list of who signed up, I realized there are those of you who both supervise people and are supervised by people. And I tried to cover a variety of areas that are difficult work environments to navigate, particularly involving people. So I'm going to share screen and get us going. Okay, so you are at the workshop, Navigating Challenging Work Environments, Thoughts on Working with Members, Supervisors, Staff, and the General Public for the AUUA meeting today. This is a photo of two of my colleagues, Reverend Lisa Presley and Cameron Young, and they were goofing around. So I included this one and asked them if I could include this slide. But sometimes our relationships and interactions with other people are complicated, difficult, entrenched. And so we're going to try and look at some of those today. So here's what this workshop covers. I'm going to talk about working with members, working with supervisors and staff colleagues, the challenges of working with the general public. There's a separate section on cultural competency and difference, or the differences that make a difference. I'm going to offer you some communication tips for challenging conversations and how to give and receive feedback. I'm going to give you some tips on something called managing up. This helps you get in alignment with your supervisor, staff, and teams, particularly all of those teams you're working with that might be full of committee members. And at the end, I have a section on managing, documenting behavior that is bullying, disrespectful, and or threatening, which I'm sad to say most of us will probably encounter at some point in our work with the public. Also throughout this, I hope you consider your choice and your role. And in all presentations, I think it's really important that you take what you want and you leave the rest, right? So let me go to my next slide, which is some thoughts on identity and power and relationship. So this workshop is really going to resonate with you differently depending on your identities, because we all have many identities, our relationships, the power dynamics and culture in the setting in which you work. So for example, I am a white, heterosexual, cisgendered, middle-aged woman. I'm also an ordained minister. So you're getting a conversation about navigating difficult environments that is being facilitated with me, with my life experience, and yours might be different. Your choices, answers, and challenges might be different as well. So not all of these presented options are going to work well for all people at all times. And I really implore you to empower yourself to discern what you need and what's best for you. All right, let's start looking at the cast of characters that we interact with on a regular basis. The first is our members and our congregations. And yes, it's a picture of people on ice. And like, are they going to break through the ice? Are they going to get hurt on the ice? Are they going to hurt someone else on the ice? Our members are, as you can see, loyal, hardworking, insightful, generous. They're wonderful. Our congregations would not exist without them. And they are unsupervised, right? They're untrained often. No one gives you training in how to run a meeting, how to run a canvas. They're unaccountable unless they are somehow evaluated, and rarely are they. And then they're also unevaluated. And this is really a complicated power dynamic. It is why our members who have challenging behaviors can be so difficult to work with, because they don't have to fill out a supervision form at the end of the year and get evaluated, though I assume at times some of you had wished that perhaps that should happen. I also do think it's a good reason that committees do evaluate their work on an annual basis. Do they have goals? Did they achieve their goals? What went well for them? What did not? Most of our committees don't engage in that. It would be better if they did. let's talk now about supervision and supervisors, because you probably have both roles. I think supervision is simply one of the most difficult tasks anyone can do in any field in order to do it well. It's easy to supervise badly. It is very challenging to supervise well. Supervisors are often untrained. Certainly as a clergy person, I didn't get any training in seminary. I have taken several classes in order to educate myself. At this point, 4, and I keep learning every time, all right? Most of us learn how to supervise on the job or from another supervisor. There are options, though, to help you along your way. So if you look at the bottom of this slide, and all of these slides will be made available, I really recommend courses through the Management Center. I'm going to refer to them often. I have recently taken 2 supervision courses through them, and this is a link to their trainings. But what I like about the Management Center is that they offer trainings for people who are both supervisors and supervised. So you can take a training based on either and or both roles and compare. Also, they offer secondary level courses. For example, if you are a person of color supervising others, that can bring complicated situations to the fore. And they offer resources for that as well. And they also consider diversity and equity in supervision, which I think a lot of places do not. So there's some other issues around if you're a supervisor or supervised. Congregations often lack job descriptions, which is a real issue. I think job descriptions, a better practice would be if they're reviewed annually. And you say you supervise someone, you sit down with the person you supervise, you look at the job description together and you say, hey, is this what I did this last year? Does this need changed? What do we think? All too often people have job descriptions no one's looked at for 5 to 8 years. And in that, it's hard to know how they can be evaluated, right? We should be partially evaluated on our job description. And yet if no one's looked at it, it can often feel slippery in terms of what are the tasks we're supposed to be doing. And it can lead to misunderstanding. Hopefully your congregation has some system of goals and goals alignment, but many do not. If you're interested in learning more about that, there's the work of Susan Beaumont and her book, When Moses Met Aaron, and that's a resource at the end of this list. That can help you make sure that your goals at least do not compete for resources of money, people, and time, which is really useful. So the congregation I used to serve in, we did goals. Let's see, the staff had goals, and each individually of us had goals. And that was a good way, and we talked about it, just to make sure like the music program wasn't going to try and run something that would in that very year compete with religious education, right? Instead, and so everyone knew, like we knew what our goals were. They were transparent. It wasn't a mystery what we were supposed to be working on. And hopefully you have some review systems in place, although of course that's always challenging. I'll say a little bit about review systems now, and evaluation. Most congregations have an annual evaluation. A better practice that's developing is to separate, and this comes as a shock from people, that annual evaluation from conversations about an increase in salary or a bonus. That those should be 2 separate conversations. Because in that evaluation, you want to make sure people can speak authentically to the challenges, and they're just not going to do that if they're thinking my salary could get tied to that. There's also a lot of creative ways to do evaluations. For example, conversations. And the final thing I would say, rather than this written evaluation, if you're in a system where you go in for an annual evaluation and your evaluation is full of surprises, something is not working in your system. Because as a supervisor, you should be giving feedback to people about issues and mistakes and problems within a week. So there shouldn't be this buildup of, and here is the list of things you did wrong for the whole year that I never gave you a chance to fix, okay? Congregations, of course, have uneven hiring policies though, because oftentimes it's driven by members and it's hard for volunteers to get all this work done. And in these days, many congregations lack an HR or personnel committee, particularly if you're a larger congregation and you have policy governance. That's a committee that doesn't exist anymore. And I think there's a real tension here because if your minister is the executive, there's a chance they may not have experience in supervision, and supervision is tricky. I often as a minister found it useful to have thought partners. I routinely had HR professionals on my personnel committee. And that was really useful for me in terms of getting their feedback if I needed to run a performance improvement plan and just making sure I wasn't doing anything that violated, for example, state law. And a final word, if your congregation hires members to do work, because some of our congregations do this. Congregational members who are staff members are often conflicted and really placed in challenging situations when they're able to do more than is possible. They are prone to breach confidentiality because of a conflict in their roles and divided loyalties. Some congregations make it so that they will never hire members. Some smaller congregations find that choice a challenge. Some limit. For example, you can still be a congregation member as long as you don't work more than 10 hours a week. But if you're going to hire someone who's going to retain their membership status, I think it pays to have a very careful conversation with them about what they'll lose. They're going to lose that minister as a minister, because that minister is going to be more concerned about the mission of the congregation than this individual for pastoral care, which is just a real hard choice for both clergy and staff members who are also members. So a lot of complication there. A lot of rocks to get hung up on, I'd say. And the other thing I just want to look at is some diversity in the general public. I want to normalize a little bit about who human beings are. So let's look a little bit at mental health. 1 in 5 adults in America experiences a mental illness. Now that could be, for example, depression, which is treatable and manageable, as are many others. And yet 1 in 25 adults in America lives with a serious mental illness. If you're in a congregation with 100 people, 4 of them, we could statistically assume, are living with a serious mental illness. Just do the math, the larger your congregation is. And so there can be a lot of distress or confusion for individuals like this. In addition, humans have differences in processing, communicating, cognition, language, and perception. All right. This is another area I think we don't think about enough. But here, I just picked a variety of things to trigger your thinking. 16 million Americans have cognitive impairment. They think differently. 15% of veterans have auditory processing disorder. They've lost hearing, right? If you can't hear well, you're not going to communicate well, easy for misunderstandings to develop. 17% of children aged 3 to 17 have developmental disabilities, and that's a range. And again, we would assume a similar percentage in adults. And 1 out of 54 children identified with an autism spectrum disorder and a similar incidence in adults. So we're dealing with a very diverse field of human interaction. I always say it's unhelpful to diagnose people. We don't need to know their diagnosis. We shouldn't inquire. We shouldn't try. But we can note and document behaviors. So-and-so has trouble sitting still. So-and-so doesn't seem to understand what I say to them. And then you can develop techniques. If so-and-so never seems to understand what you've said, you can ask them to repeat back to you what they think you said, and then you can try and clarify, right? So when you start realizing where the breakdown is in your communication, sometimes that can assist you. All right, without putting pigeonholing someone as an illness. That doesn't seem right either. We want to focus on behaviors. All right, these are our people, all of these people, all of these different concerns, lives, relationships, identities. It's a lot. It's a lot. Here's some thoughts on culture and communication. So often we think of challenging work environments, people are not transparent enough about differences that make a difference. So let's take a look at that. You'll note when I started here, I told you about my identities. And the reason I like to be aware of that is because I need to know who I am to have at least a guess in my mind about the differences I might have from other people. If I lack self-awareness, I assume everyone's like me. And they most definitely are not. We all have different experiences and histories and family cultures and community cultures. So we do live in a country with white supremacy culture, meaning if you are white, like myself, you have been privileged. We are also in a culture that is conflict avoidant, all right? And it lacks experience with holding difficult conversations. One of the most common things I coach people on is how to have a difficult conversation. Within our American culture, however, there is great diversity, right? So Americans have different understandings about how to negotiate differences and what is discussable when, and there are significant cultural and ethnic differences in American culture about that. So for example, some cultures are more direct and indirect, expressive, inexpressive, and all of that can be found within the United States. And I see we had a Canadian here and in Canada as well. Although I frankly don't know as much about race and culture in Canada, I am much more familiar with the United States. So I don't want to speak into an avenue I don't know a lot about. But so for example, in one culture, it can be really important to be direct. My family culture, very direct, to the point it's uncomfortable for people. So in some congregations, people don't want to talk about money, right? That's impolite. That's not culturally appropriate. Well, but that's just a norm. But this can lead to challenging navigation. How are you going to have your comprehensive sexuality curriculum? How do different people groups, cultures, race, ethnicities discuss that? How don't they discuss that? Similarly, I have a sister who lives in a European country that's even more direct than me. And I am always shocked when I go to visit her about what people will directly say to you. So it just has reminded me that my way is not the only way, and maybe I need to sometimes adapt or think differently. And any work that you can do to improve your cultural competence, awareness, and humility is going to assist you. A tool that I've used that has helped me a lot is the Intercultural Development Inventory. I've taken it 3 times. I tested the same way twice. I tested different one time. So you can shift how you test on it. There's also online classes. It was just a good tool for personal learning for me, helping me understand differences that make a difference. It has its flaws too. It's not a perfect tool. Not everyone likes it. And in fact, some people, Indigenous, person of color, or Black individuals do not like it as well. It tends to work a little bit better for people who are white. So I want to be transparent about that. Although with that said, of course, I know people of color who teach it. So it's a complicated world. Now we've gotten to people, our members, our supervisors, human behavior, communication and culture. And then, let's look at another reality, me or you. So 3 things you're going to need to accept about yourself in any work around a challenging work environment and communication. This comes from the book, Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. Number 1, you will make mistakes. And if you're just going to be honest about that, it's really going to help you. I will make mistakes. I have made several mistakes I'm not happy about in the last year, and I've learned from all of them. Unfortunately, some people had a difficult impact from my mistake, right? Your intentions are complicated. Mine are as well. Sometimes when we tell our story, we try and defend ourselves even in our storytelling about what happened. I didn't have another choice. I didn't know what to do. Is that really honest? You know, maybe you were avoiding a problem because you didn't know what to do. Maybe you didn't have the resources for your job, so you just said the heck with it, right? Intentions are complicated. And you and or I might have contributed to the problem. I put in might here because sometimes there's real finger pointing at whoever is the minority voice that you are the problem. And I think that's been a way to continue to marginalize people from historically marginalized communities. So hold this one rather lightly, depending on your identities and situations. With a culture of white supremacy, of course, we are always squashing voices that are not that and ideas that are different from that. And yet any of us can contribute to a problem at some point. Were you the person who got angry way too fast? Were you the person who dropped the ball on the project? It just pays to wonder about one's own role. And I couldn't find a good photo, so that's a photo of me going, there. Okay, here's some tips and tools about difficult conversations. I've got a couple slides about if you have to have a difficult conversation. Because really when you're navigating a challenging work environment, you're trying to know who you are and how it's impacting you, how it's impacting other people, and how you might want to communicate and problem solve around it. And I want to give you a series of tools that you can pick up and be like, not this one this time, but maybe this one, right? Just a series of tools in your toolbox. This again comes from Difficult Conversations. The authors of this book, and this comes out of the Harvard Negotiating Project, by the way. It's just a really great, they've done Getting to Yes, a series of other books. They say every difficult conversation is actually 3 conversations. The first is what happened. Second is the feelings conversation, and third is the identity conversation. And what they mean by that, I've broken down a little bit below the slide. The what happened is collecting stories of what happened. It's just everyone's different point of view, and it does not mean you're trying to find blame. You're just trying to get the fuller picture. I even find working in congregations, if I just talk to the board president, oh, I am so missing the lay view, the clergy view, if there is a clergy person, it's just really important. And in fact, the writer Chimamanda Adichie has this great TED talk called The Danger of a Single Story. It is marvelous in how we need to just know that our story is only one. Sometimes it pays to get everyone's story and more than just one other person's. Here's the feeling conversation. Unexpressed feelings make it difficult to listen and learn. If you're angry, if you are already frustrated, if you are grief-stricken about something else, if you are sad, you're just not like listening. You're kind of tapped out or preoccupied. So to be aware of what are your feelings. I came in today in a bad mood. I came in today worried about my sick parent. I came in today scared about my child who's getting bullied in school, right? This is real because we are humans in this environment too. And finally, become aware of your identities. And when they talk about that identities in this book, they're really talking about something different that I think is pivotal. And going back to this one concept has saved me a lot of grief. Be aware of your identities. People, according to these authors, have basic concerns. Are we competent, good, and worthy of love? So for example, if we make a mistake, we start to worry, we are the mistake, we're not good. Maybe it means I'm not lovable. And then it becomes something you don't want to discuss. It feels undiscussable, right? So sometimes why did I get so hooked on something? Why am I still thinking about a conflict from a year ago? Why do I feel engaged in like a silent conflict with someone? And often it's because I got triggered to think I wasn't competent or good or worthy of love. So just hold this one in your possibilities to consider. Oh, and I love, by the way, difficult conversations. They really want to help you. There's a graph at the end for you to use, like you can review it, like prior to having a difficult conversation with someone. There's like the tools of things you can consider, to work yourself up, like a test run or a rehearsal. I have used such tools and found them really helpful. We are a little more than halfway through our slides, just so you know that. Here's something else I want to uplift from the Management Center. I love this link. Please go back to it. They have a concept called DICEY feedback. DICEY feedback is feedback about diversity, inclusion, culture, equity, and you. And if you read it here, it says DICEY feedback is often a clue that tells you you're the iceberg, or that there is an iceberg, where the problem on the surface is attached to a larger, multi-layered and complex issue. How you engage with that staff member who raised the concern and how you tackle that issue they raised could have significant implications, not just for your working relationship, but also your organization's equity and inclusion journey and overall effectiveness. So say a junior employee, and I think this is the example they have on this sheet. Junior employee, you're organizing voter outreach. A junior employee comes to you 48 hours or so before a campaign starts. I think they identify that person as Latino, Latina, Latinx. And that individual says, I'm not sure we're marketing this great for the community where I'm from. You could be like, it's too late, we don't have enough time, why didn't you tell me earlier? All of those things tell that person, we don't care about you. And then the way you responded to the feedback becomes the problem, right? Rather than being like, well, tell me more about that. Well, what do you mean? Or, what held you back from giving this feedback sooner? Maybe this person has been shut down before. Wouldn't you want to know that, right? So how we can listen to feedback even when we don't want to hear it is really important, or when it's inconvenient or doesn't fit in your timeline or whatever. But your organization's willingness to hold that either builds credibility or breaks it for you, all right? The most productive feedback, here it is. Oh, you saw someone you supervise doing something that's just not okay. Oh, you don't want to tell them. And yet, it's your job. And I say it's your job in a week or less. The better you need to get, the harder it is, the sooner you should do it. I'm not saying be urgent and rush. Think it through. What do you need to say? Why was it a problem? But make it timely, direct, and private, right? People don't like to be called out in public. I get sometimes there's calling out and calling in, but if it's someone you're supervising, maybe it's so egregious you have to stop something in the moment, but maybe it's something you caught out of the corner of your eye on the way to something else, and you want to stop them later that day and talk about it, right? Obviously, you need to stop right away if there's a situation of harm or hurt. But a lot of us are conflict avoidant, including myself, on giving difficult feedback. I'd be approaching 6 days and I'd be like, Sharon, this is your sign you're denying. Pick up the phone, say, hey, I need to talk to you about something I observed this week related to your job. When can we set up an appointment? That's how you go. And again, use that worksheet on difficult conversations. And when you're having that conversation, you also want to know what they think. You do not need to hide in a very small basket and put your stuffy over your face. You can do this. So this again comes from the Management Center. It is how to give better feedback. So connect over shared value. I really appreciate all the work you do on our youth programming. I have a great care about this, and it's obvious you do. I have observed, however, that the lesson plans are always late. What happens for you in the creation of lesson plans, and what are your thoughts? So, and then wrap up with, you have a conversation, you agree on something, but you see, you connected over a shared value, you shared an observation, you asked a question because there's a dangerous single story, yours, mine, and then you wrap up with some agreed upon next steps. I actually used this with a colleague that I was involved in a microaggression. I, of course, didn't intend it, but that's the way microaggressions go. And it had the impact, though, that was not good at all and caused harm. And so I used this tool in my conversation, and I was fortunate this colleague was willing to talk to me. But I really saw that Seesaw helped us have the conversation we needed to have. All right. Here's some thoughts on blame. Anxious systems love blame. It's your fault. And then, you know, someone ends up feeling like that poor little orangutan. Thoughts on blame. Blame is a sign of anxiety in your system. So if you feel the need to blame someone, if someone's blaming you, if you watch the congregation blow up into blame, you're like, anxiety is afoot. And that's a good thing to know. So blame actually hinders problem solving, keeps ineffective systems in place, because then we can pretend that one person is the problem. That troublemaker is the problem. No, the whole system lets that person be a troublemaker and act that way. The whole system enables those behaviors. So what's going on in your system? Because you can start having the magical thinking that if that one person goes away, it'll all get better. No, there's something in the system. So sometimes if you just blame one person, it hides the truth about a deeper system. It looks backward instead of forward. It indicates anxiety, and it can prevent productive change. So yes, people are responsible. Yes, we should talk about responsibility. Yes, hopefully people can take responsibility for their mistakes. In an anxious system, it's actually harder to take responsibility because people fear getting blamed. And that really hinders talking about the real issues or doing other problem solving. All right, I'm now switching to the section on if you're out of sync with a team you supervise or your supervisor or a work group you're in. This comes from the Management Center, and the link is at the bottom on how to get aligned. So a lot of people, I was recently coaching someone, and the question of how to get aligned with a busy supervisor is a real one, right? Your supervisor could have a lot going on. And then, although you want to do a good job on the project, you might not be sure if you're on the right track or the track that your supervisor wanted. And I think this can also help with our committees that can go a little bit rogue, you know, they wander away and you're like, hey, are we on the same page? You know, so if you get assigned a new project, it's a great question to ask, what will success look like? So say your supervisor is a vague, or the committee you work with is vague. This is a great way to get aligned, even if there aren't evaluations and it's unclear who has what authority. What's success going to look like here? And write it down and converse about it. And then send an email. Great, good to know success looks like this. And then you have it in print for future when you forget, and they do too. What are the ideal outcomes? What are the constraints? You don't have more than $1,000. You have $10,000. I can't give you a person to help it. You can have 10 hours a week. You know, but sometimes just asking what are the constraints, you're not being obstructionist or difficult. You're just like, honestly. And then like, if in your head you start to be like, this is going to take $5,000, you have an opportunity to come back and be like, I know there's no money, but I want to let you know what's involved in this as I've done some research so that we can hold this challenge, right? How to prioritize the work. This is a big one. Congregations are notorious for this. It's kind of like your priority gets thrown out the window because a new one gets dumped on your lap, right? So a great thing to ask that, again, is not hostile, is just, hey, these are the things I also had to achieve this today or this week, and I can see this one's important. What order would you like me to do them in, right? How to keep, what will be the plan for your report? How to keep your manager engaged and informed. We're going to talk a little bit about that on the next slide. How to know if you're on the right track. You kind of need to check in. Just want to give you an update, you know, like 2 weeks in, a month in, a quarter in, project's going this well. And again, it shows you're paying attention and you're trying to do the work, right? And sometimes if you do this, it becomes clear where the system failed rather than you didn't do your job or someone you supervised didn't do their job. And there's also this great tool Andrew and I just used this week called a sample debrief agenda they have at the Management Center. And it's a form you can use to debrief projects you work on to help you understand what you've learned, what you want to change for next time, what you could improve, what went well. It's a great form. Love it. Highly recommend it. All right, I have 3 more slides. Here again is managing up for those of you who are dealing, this could be you have plenty of authority, but you're working with an unsupervised committee, or you want to work with your supervisor, or even if you're on like a board someplace and you're working with the staff and you're not in charge, but you have questions and ideas. So this is a small snippet from this sheet. Just go to this sheet, which is the managing phrases. They have like 10 things that might be happening to you on your job, or you could see someone, a committee struggling with this. And these are like tips and tools to keep you connected and aligned. And I'll be honest, out of trouble, right? No one can come back and be like, you just didn't do your job. You're like, I reached out to you. I sent this email. I notified this. I reported you on that. So if your manager is busy and cancels meetings, say, I know you're really busy. Can I talk with your assistant and get 10 minutes on your calendar? Hey, it seems like Tuesday morning at 9 is a bad time to meet. Could we try Tuesday at 10? Send the agenda ahead of time. Just want to let you know what I want to talk about in my supervision session today, right? All of these things and more can help you. And here, if your manager doesn't get back to you about work you send for input or approval, you know, is there a way for me to make it easier to get your input? Can I send this to you monthly at a certain date? You can also try, I'm going to give you an update, and if I don't hear back, I'll move forward on my own suggestions. There is like 10 scenarios on this sheet, like your manager doesn't answer your emails. So if that looks like use to you, go for it. It can also help your employees you're supervising if they feel stuck or you notice them having issues, even with you, right, as a supervisor. The last thing I want to talk about is when we work with people who actually concern us, all right? Here, this is from the Department of Labor Workplace Violence Program. So this is an excerpt from 2020. This is just level 1. There are other levels to this that are much more concerning, although level 1 is plenty concerning. It is written assuming you're like an employer-employee relationship with the union, which most of us probably are not. But if you observe, again, observed behaviors, if you observe behavior that is continually intimidating, bullying, discourteous, disrespectful, uncooperative, and or verbally abusive, you have an issue. Best be honest about it. Observe the behavior in question. Note the pattern, observe it, and document. Document, document, document. I was at a meeting. I was called X. So-and-so touched X at this time, X. Document, okay, for yourself, date, time, and was someone else there to witness it. Report, if you can, to your supervisor to seek help and assessing and responding to the situation. You know, these situations are slippery. Sometimes, like, you're thinking, maybe you're new on a job and someone yells at you and you're like, I don't know that person. Maybe they're having a bad day. And then a month later, they yell at you for something else. And you're like, this person yells a lot and I don't want this to continue. A first step that might work, is to talk to your supervisor. What if, however, the person doing this is your supervisor, right? Let's not be naive. Hopefully, your congregation has some personnel policies in place, but if it doesn't, you might need to go to the board president. You might need to go to an HR committee if you have one. So there's a variety of scenarios there. And then the document. And they suggest meeting with whoever is of concern. Should your supervisor do it? Should you do it? Should you do it with your supervisor or a third person? All of those things are for you to discern. When I was having a really difficult conversation with someone, I generally wanted a third person there, okay? It was just to make sure I wasn't going to be accused of being harassing or intimidating. And to make sure I was following appropriate policies, right? I didn't want to accidentally violate a policy. So again, schedule a private time and place. You generally want to tell someone what the topic is. They can choose not to come, and there could be consequences for that, but you've told them. If there's a covenant for your congregation or a disruptive persons policy or harassment policy, you want to follow that. Get to the point. Here's the troubling behavior, right? It's about behavior. We've documented it at this time. What's their story about that? What can be done about this? Identify steps to change, set limits. Some of our congregations have limited access agreements for people with difficult behaviors. So a series of things can happen that could help you. And you kind of have to depend, will the person come to the meeting? Will they talk to you? Will they say they're behaving in a challenging way, or will they deny and refuse? There's an endless variation of what could happen depending on what kind of policies your congregation has in place. So here's my very last slide. It's the resources, okay? There is the Intercultural Development Inventory. There is this book, Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. Their former book was Getting to Yes, the Harvard Negotiation Project. There is this book. I did not reference it, but it can be a good one. Fierce Conversations, Achieving Success at Work and in Life, One Conversation at a Time. It is written, however, from the position of someone with privilege. So sometimes I think she takes on too much, and I'm like, I don't think most employees feel safe enough to do that in that way. So you can take this one with a grain of salt. She's got some good tips, though. Your congregation's employee handbook and policies, right? That's important. The UUA has sample personnel policies if you don't have one, or if you want to check if yours are up to date, and I included the link. The UUA has some job description, salary, benefit review information that could be helpful for you. The Management Center, there's their website. Here's their book, Managing to Change the World, the Nonprofit Manager's Guide to Getting Results. Great book. Here is the one a lot of clergy have read, and it really is excellent, by Susan Beaumont. When Moses Met Aaron, Staffing and Supervision in Large Congregations. I know it says large congregations. If you're in a congregation of 150 people and you supervise someone, this is useful. It's Gil Rendell and Susan Beaumont, and Susan Beaumont still offers some trainings. So, and then finally, there was the Department of Labor Workplace Violence Program as a resource. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm so glad we have 15 minutes left. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'm going to let Andrew tell me what the questions are.
Here's one from someone. What conversations have you found that are the hardest?
Oh, an employee I really liked, and I had to tell them something difficult, like someone I was kind of friend-ish with. You know, they say you can't be friends with people you supervise. They say ministers can't be friends with the staff, which is why if you're a member and a staff member, it's so hard. And the other ones are the ones where, so it helps to know your triggers. People yelling at me is a bit of a trigger. So when people got easily agitated or yelled, we had some yellers, or were really like shaming and disapproving, those were always the conversations. I really like had to go through a little dress rehearsal. What was I going to say? Was I going to stay calm? Like I had to write it out. Those were the two that were hardest for me. Yes, Julie, you can unmute yourself.
So I have a question about people who you establish a boundary, you think you've set up what that boundary looks like, and then they ignore it. And I've had this with employees, but I've also had it with, say, contractors. One of our recent examples is there was a contractor, not even for us, for a building across from us, putting a dumpster on our lot. And we told them they couldn't, and they're like, okay. And then they put a dumpster on our lot. And it was very difficult to get the police to intervene because they won't tow dumpsters on private properties. You know, the dumpster company didn't want to intervene because these people were the ones who had hired them. And so, you know, it's not the only example I've had of things like that, but it's one of them, of like people, you think you've agreed on what the situation is, and then they ignore it in a way that's very difficult for you to unilaterally take action on.
So, you know, anything you can always get in writing, which is also why you want to document, why you want to, like, my understanding of what we've agreed to, like everything in writing is always best. The situation you mentioned is an interesting one to me, only because my husband's in construction. So from his lens, the police don't have a ton of power, and whoever puts the dumpster there, it's the contractor, and it could be whoever is in charge of the project or whoever wants the project. Like, where is the power and the pain felt at the end of the day is where you need to go. And it's interesting. Like, what do you really do though? Like, if your neighbor is doing a big construction project and maybe like they're a big corporation and they kind of don't care that you're unhappy, that's really tough. You know, I think you want to document agreements. I think you want to complain vociferously. I think you want to look at, is there any city or neighborhood law you can use? But, you know, it's so true. Like, I think sometimes the most challenging, we don't have a lot of power sometimes, right? What's your power in this situation, you know? So is there anything I said in there that's useful, or more you want to say, or more you thought about?
No, I mean, I think it was just a situation that didn't really have a good answer, that particular one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because it was the contractor who was the one who put it there, and he didn't care because he knew that there was nothing we could really do about that.
Wow.
And ultimately we wound up like, and we'd send him emails of like, hey, you agree that you're not going to put the dumpster on our lot, and he, you know, and ultimately it was like a subcontractor who happened to be there when the dumpster was being put down. And I went, this is like the third or fourth time, and I went outside and raised high hell with her, and she at least seemed to understand it. And then after that it got fixed, but I had to happened to be there at the right day and find the right person.
So I almost didn't want to say it, but a truth I have observed, which has nothing to do with this presentation, but my husband in construction, yelling gets you somewhere, and sometimes you need a man to yell. And I am sorry that's so sexist, but that is how I have seen the field operate, listening to my husband on the phone. And I'm really sorry about that. I saw a question of the slides. Yes, they're available. Yes, 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 yes. And all the resources, yes. And I think there was another question in here. I want to go back up.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Good address. Let me see. The first one is, a problem individual may not be someone that you actually supervise. Can you speak to strategies in this situation?
Yeah, so that's why, so I think, for example, members are really hard. You know, the member who stands too close to you, the member who calls you late at night, you know, a series of things can develop. You want to talk to your supervisor, but sometimes supervisors are not sympathetic or won't focus on it. You can try and create an understanding with that person, but by the time it becomes a continual, it's just a management issue. You're going to be managing like chronic pain. I kind of don't want to be over sunny to you. Like, it would be lovely if you're like, yeah, it can all go away. But we have this challenge, particularly in our congregations, where we have all of these members who in some ways have more power than even the staff, and they're unsupervised. It's a setup for kind of abuses of power, okay? And that is a real challenge. I tried to be very supportive of staff I supervised when people acted a certain way. I would even go as far as to, if my employee wanted me to, talk to someone. I would encourage you to keep trying to work it, and I would encourage you to try and go to your policies. Is there anything in there under the staff handbook, under disruptive persons, harassment, anything at all that you can use, or the covenant, if your congregation has a covenant?
Thank you, Sharon. I have a few more questions. Here's one. How do you deal with multiple members that act as your supervisor? However, you only have one supervisor as the minister that you report to.
Okay, A, I'm really sorry. I'm just going to start right there. We always talked about that as just about the worst setup for employees. And in fact, Dan Hotchkiss writes about this in his book, that his book, Governance and Ministry. It is just the worst when you're supervised by a group. And then you're supervised by people who aren't accountable either. That's the other thing that always irked me. Like, why should they have so much power? And then that's a cultural norm. It's just very frustrating. I thought it was profoundly unfair to staff. We tried as hard as we could in my congregation. By the way, I need to say, when I came to the congregation I served, every staff member but one was a member, and none of them were supervised at all, and couldn't find job descriptions. So you can start from there and move. It's a work in progress. I think it's really important to get staff to be supervised by staff. It's really unfair when they're supervised by members, because it can be like the chair supervises you. The chair like rotates every year. That's like almost cruel and unusual, having a new supervisor every year. On the other hand, you know, be careful, because some systems, the person who would logically supervise you, you might not want that person supervising you either. So there's a lot of things to consider around that. I do think even if there's a committee that supervises you, it should be feedback from one person. You can't keep taking feedback from 3 or 4 people, because it won't agree. It's too confusing. And you need to just talk to them. It's got to be one person, just one. And can we work towards staff supervising staff?
Thank you, Sharon. I think there's a few more questions. We have 5 minutes today, so maybe about 2 or 3 more questions. But the next one is, someone was interested in the Department of Labor resources you provided, and someone being intimidating and disrespectful. How does white supremacy culture influence how we view people of color and their actions? And are there any resources to help with this?
I think that's a big issue. I think, you know, if someone is a person of color and they get angry, they get labeled really quickly. And there can be a misunderstanding about the true outrages they've been living with. And I think the best place to go is the Management Center. They have great resources on what is diversity and equity in the workplace. They've put out resources now. How can you help your staff who are POCI? They have resources now. So your company says it wants to engage in this work. Have you looked inside close enough? And I think they're the organization I've seen doing the best work on this. There's books I could refer to you, but I like that they're like in a business model. So like I could tell you about White Fragility or How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. But if you just want like a worksheet on how, they even like when they do goals at the Management Center, they make you consider the diversity and equity impact of those goals. That's terrific. That's really different. And all of this stuff can be found online. I get their mailing. I've taken classes from them, but I'm also on their newsletter. So I regularly go back to their stuff. I think that's a tremendous question. it's far too easily to just be exhausted by getting like buttonholed is the problem when you're just this person who's not in the majority. So thank you for that question. I love that question. I saw a question I liked. It's hard when you're mostly nice. People think you're a pushover. And I have been having to get angry to be respected. I know what you mean. So the tools I gave you some tools that are a little more direct and a little more subtle. Like some of them might feel manipulative, but like I've gotten to the point where I'm like, does it get you safer and clearer in your workplace? You know, so it might seem a little duplicitous or annoying to or cloying to walk up to your manager and be like, can we find another time? Or I'm going to send you like an input and can you get it back? But like, if it covers you and helps you do your job, that's what I hope to empower you to do, right? Because the only person we get to control is us. We don't get to control anyone else. We can't make supervisors respond. We can't make members like stay farther away than we might wish they would. We can't stop people from microaggressions. I wish we could, we can't. I wish I could always stop myself. I'm still learning. So I think that's tough stuff. Someone has a question about email communication problems. Ooh, ask that question, Mary Jane.
That's me. Ever since COVID hit, all the committees and everything gets done by email, which is really problematic because we're losing all the nonverbal cues. We're not discussing things. It's like everybody's got a tirade and then somebody else pipes in with yeah, or they go off on another 4 paragraphs. Things are coming in out of sequence. It's not like when we had in-person meetings. And I'm screaming that we need to be doing Zoom meetings so that we can all kind of talk at the same time on something and answer questions. But it seems to be that people that have a lot of time are really enjoying this whole email thing. And those of us that have tried to control our email all along and are now dealing with 800 times more email than we've ever had to wade through are losing our minds. And I don't know if people are angry, and I'm not sure I'm angry. You know, it's just a problem.
It's angry, it's anxiety, it's a whole bunch of things. I think for this sort of situation, okay, so, you know, email can take you down a pit just like social media. So the next better thing, the phone. So like if I need to disrupt a cycle of like also like if I've gotten 5 emails from someone, time to pick up the phone. Or time to say, let's schedule a time to talk next week. Maybe they're not the person you want to talk to right now, but you need to talk to them. So how to be proactive, like it's a lot of emails. I think I might be missing things. I don't want to. Let's set a time to talk X. Or for your committee, let's set a monthly time to talk X. I think I might be missing some things on the emails. A lot of different ones come, they don't all agree. I think also kind of normalizing for people your work environment, like whether you put it in your message, a sort of, you know, like, want to let you know I get more emails a day now. It takes me longer to get through them. If you could condense your thoughts or put them all together so that I receive one email. However you can coach people, I would encourage you. It's not going to solve everything, Mary Jane.
No, but it makes me feel better. And that's all that matters at this point.
All right.
Okay, Sharon, I have one. Let me find. Here it is. So what do you do if you don't feel supported by your supervisor? One person was invited to 2 different board meetings to talk about their position, and several people were very antagonistic, but their supervisor, which was the minister, did not stop any of the members, and the board didn't do anything either. And it also happened at a future committee meeting as well. How does one manage that?
So, and I see another question I don't want to ignore about someone thinks their job is on the line or they need to tell someone. Okay, You should always be doing a performance improvement plan before you supervise someone out of a job. And that is a plan. And someone who's an HR professional could you get you a copy of something and coach you on it. It's like a one-page, like, here are the observable problems and here's the work we're going to do. Because if that employee improves or changes, you want to keep them. It also protects you as documentation that you tried to work it out. You didn't withhold information or lie to this employee. You communicated. So I just want to offer that resource. The question about no one stuck up for you is a hard one. It is a really tough one. So sometimes boards have a lot of power, but they feel disempowered. I think I might talk to the supervisor if you could. Like, I found that conversation challenging. I'm wondering what you thought about it. I wondered if you had considered saying anything, and if so, what that was. I mean, look, I'm not going to tell you can't go into supervisor and be like, what were you thinking? You didn't support me at all. I'm just saying you might not get as much as you want if you do that. And on the other hand, if you can't take it anymore, I don't feel like I'm the jury on how you comport yourself at work. But if you still want to try and problem solve, it can be useful to go around to people and talk to them individually. I'm just curious about this. And also it can help to like step back and are you missing something? Is there something going on in the system? I once supervised an employee who I think, because she pressed people didn't want to listen to her. And then because she was in a different age group, people didn't want to listen to her. And I found the board really stuck on that. And I didn't seem to be able to move them off of that very well. And in doing that, I thought they were curtailing diversity of voices and thought, which was a problem for them that their system could not realize. Like, I kept trying to like, whoa. So I think you need to start asking yourself, I'll be honest, do you want to be there and under what circumstances? I think you have a right to find a place where you feel like you can be heard, you know? So best wishes with that one. That one's really hard too. It is very hard to have a supervisor you don't respect or like or think is competent. It's easy to be too hard on your supervisor, and the Management Center has a file on how to humanize your supervisor. You can look at that too, because it's complicated, but some work situations are corrosive and unsupportive. Let's see if there's anything else. Deal with members who refer to you as the secretary. Yes. You can correct them. You can put a sign on your desk, on your office, and you can refer to yourself in that way. You can ask your supervisor to refer to himself through that way. Could you write a letter in your newsletter article about why you have this title? Because maybe they don't understand all you do, and that might be like they think you just get the phones, and that's not all you do, right? You might be handling complicated finances or projections or something. So I would recommend that, and telling people directly, oh, you might remember the secretary who just got the phones. I do the X and then the X and the X. My title is X. And unfortunately, it's not educating one person, it's like 20 people. So I get that's why it hurts after a while. It's like what a microaggression feels like. It's the 10th person who has said something to you on something.
I just want to remind people of time. We're about 5 minutes after the hour.
Oh, goodness.
So Sharon, I don't know if you're able to stay on a little longer or what you're...
I can stay on. Anxiety and Systems. Yes, this is the best book ever. Please buy it and read it. I took this book out and read it cover to cover about every 3 years. It's called Congregational Leadership in Anxious Times by Peter Steinke. It's not long. It is an absolutely tremendous book. They talk about how you can calm yourself. They talk about how you can individuate in an anxious system, which means keep yourself separate and not get sucked in. I have coached people on this book. This book is amazing. When I got anxious and worried and scared, I read this book again, right? That was my tool. I've been triggered. I read that book. Oh, millennials will phone a verse? Gosh, that's good advice for me. I just heard that, read that in the chat. Yes, I do agree. A 5-minute chat where there was a moment my congregation was devolving in angry emails, and someone just looked at me who was a psychologist and said, you know, Sharon, sometimes it's just time to get back on the phone. And I was like, oh, she's right. And so ever since then, I'm like, okay, pick up the phone. When I feel too stuck, gone on too long, going in circles.
I have one other question, Sharon, if you have time.
Yes.
How do you deal with no supervisor while you wait for an interim minister to begin, and the volunteer that would naturally be put in that position is high in conflict with all staff and frequently crosses boundaries? How do you deal with that conflict?
So hopefully your interim comes sooner or later. I gotta be honest, like there are times I was like, okay, my gig for the next 6 months is to kind of just like, I can't believe I'm going to say this in a recording, distract and divert. I'm keeping that supervisor in relationship at a distance. That supervisor is not capable of assisting me with my problems. They will probably make my problems worse. I need to be careful about how much I want to share with that person. Maybe they have boundary issues, even in terms of confidentiality. So you essentially are unfortunately supervisor-less. That is profoundly stressful. Could you get a support group of colleagues in similar roles to you to like assist you at this time? You know, you're going to have to find a support for you, but I don't think you're going to be able to get good supervision in that situation. And I hope you get better supervision when the new person arrives, right? That's a tough one. If it's going to be like 6 months or less, I think you try and put it off unless you see it leading to a significant misunderstanding about you, something unethical happening, something unsafe happening. You have to consider how much of a problem does it make it for you to make it an issue, right? Yeah, you can't get the chat. I don't let people save the chat. It's true. If you have more questions, you can reach out to me. And I hope they do an evaluation. I really do, because I would really be interested in your feedback about what you liked and would have liked more of. So please, if they do an evaluation, please fill it out. I'll actually read it and learn something. So thanks so much for your time, and thank you for your work. I know you do a lot of things not observed by other people. So thanks so much. And thanks, Andrew. Oh, last book, Peter Steinke. Peter Steinke. Congregational Leadership in Anxious Times. The subtitle is Being Calm and Courageous, No Matter What. All right. Bye all.